Are things for you good?
We're on the
Things for you good?
school.
Same old, same old. Living in a great community.
We're all set. Okay. The Wilton Board of Education we actually convened at 6:30 this evening and immediately went into executive session to discuss the superintendent's evaluation. We have already approved the agenda, so we will move on to the next item on our agenda, which is comments from the public. As we do at every meeting, we are happy to welcome comments from anybody from the public who would like to come and address the board. Seeing no one, there will be an opportunity at the end of the meeting if anyone would like to come up. Next up is the consent agenda. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the consent agenda?
Yes.
Yes.
Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent agenda is approved. We are going to go a little out of order tonight and have the superintendent's report ahead of the chairman's report.
Great.
That was for you.
I hope that's not one of our horn players. Tonight I've asked First Selectman Vanderslice to join us at the top of our meeting to engage with us a little bit in a conversation around the recent incidents of anti-Semitism in our middle school. As you know, today we experienced a particularly repugnant incident where one of our Jewish 6th grade students found a sticky note on her locker that read, "Jews will burn." I want everyone to know I'm, like many of you, horrified by this act and really having difficulty coming to terms that it happened in our middle school. We are actively investigating and are doing everything in our power to find the perpetrator. Once we find the individual responsible, we will be prosecuting to the fullest extent of the law and exercising the full scope of our ability to suspend and expel. The appearance of swastikas and the creation of this note serve as a call to action for all of us. Tomorrow morning at Middlebrook, we'll be meeting with parents in the auditorium at 9 a.m. Rabbi Bierman will be making every effort to join us, as will First Selectman Vanderslice and Steve Ginsburg from the Connecticut Anti-Defamation League. Lynn and I have begun planning a meeting with our local clergy and town officials to coordinate a broader community response. We're actually trying to get people together as soon as tomorrow. We haven't yet been able to confirm that, but that will happen as soon as humanly possible. In my opinion, and I'm sure you share it, Wilton is a wonderfully inclusive, caring community filled with individuals committed to serving and raising others up. We cannot allow these acts to define who we are. As a community, I think we all need to come together and model for our children the values and the beliefs that we cherish. When Principal Felt and I addressed the students at Middlebrook, we called on them too to come together and support one another and not let this hateful act represent them. In the note that I sent to staff earlier this afternoon, I reminded them that in dark times, we as educators have the capacity to be bright lights of hope for those who are fearful, anxious, and uncertain. I want everyone to know that our children are safe in our schools because they are surrounded by teachers and by administrators and by other students who love them, who are filled with compassion, care, and sensitivity. As educators, we reaffirm our commitment to those values that we most cherish, and we do stand together against acts of hatred by speaking out and by serving as role models. Through our word and behavior, we help our students find their own voice and agency in confronting hate. We have to stand together against the threats of incidents like these becoming normalized and defend against being desensitized to acts of hate and violence. I want everyone to know that the Wilton schools, Wilton police, and town officials are working as a cohesive unit both to investigate these incidents while also reaching out to teach students why such acts of hate are wrong and are hurtful. I implore our parents and our caregivers to bring these discussions into their homes. Hopefully tonight they'll take a few minutes and over the next few evenings remind their children of the seriousness of this situation and why we must make it our highest priority. This is a community built on love, tolerance, and respect. I think working together, recognizing that we all have a role to play in teaching our children, I feel very confident that we'll emerge stronger and a better community. On that, I'd like to invite Lynn Vanderslice to come to the table and join in the conversation. Sure.
Here with
Linda.
the microphone.
Welcome.
Thank you. We are having audio problems on TV at home.
Okay.
If I could just say make a couple of comments. I wanted to come here tonight because this is just not a schools problem. This is a community issue that we all need to work together on. As a community, we want every child, every parent, and every resident to feel safe and included, whether in the schools or anywhere else in our community. As Dr. Smith said, the police are investigating today's incident. We're taking it very seriously, and as he indicated, we'll take it the necessary distance. The 3 incidents, the symbols, the language, they're all unacceptable, and that message needs to be sent loud and clear. I want every Jewish student and their parents, and particularly the student that was targeted today, to know that town leadership stands in support of them and that they're all valued members of this community. As Dr. Smith said, we all know that Wilton is generally a respectful, understanding, generous community focused on service to others. But if we're going to be honest, there has been an increase in meanness and inappropriate actions in town. I think we need to acknowledge it and we need to address it head on. So I'm happy to work with Dr. Smith, the clergy, and other leaders to do so. We will be meeting tomorrow. I expect that we will be on the steps of Town Hall to make a public statement. Then we'll be working together on the 13th on what will be really a first step and what I hope will be an action-oriented approach to address the things that have been happening in the community. So we're here as your partner to work together to make our community a better place for every resident. Thanks.
Thanks, Lynn.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to add my thoughts as well. Like so many in our community, I was shocked, disgusted, and saddened by the incidents that happened at Middlebrook, particularly today. I wish to convey in the strongest possible terms that we must have zero tolerance for the symbols and language of hate. It sickens me that tonight in Wilton there are students who feel that they aren't valued as members of our school community and who are afraid to go to school. But I think it's important to also note that while, yes, this did happen to one student today, it really happened to the entire school community. I hope that every parent and caregiver will realize this and take the time to talk with your children. Ask them what they think about what happened and make sure they understand why the community is responding as definitively as we are. As a 23-year resident of Wilton, I know this to be a loving and tolerant community. But nevertheless, these incidents must be taken seriously. I wholeheartedly support the community approach that the First Selectman and Superintendent Smith are taking. As a community, I know we will use our collective talents to address these unacceptable incidents. Would anyone else from the board like to weigh in on this? Okay. Laura?
As a trained American historian, I have studied and taught people of diverse backgrounds, whether in terms of ethnicity, race, and religion. The U.S. has had many dark, horrific periods in its history, and the American people have never stayed in those dark periods. When we have confronted racism and prejudice, we move above and beyond it. The people of Wilton should not run from what has happened. We should stop, confront these incidents, because we are better than hate. We have more than that to offer our children. Together we can move into a brighter place where all of us are safe and we can gain strength from our neighbors.
Thank you.
I'll try to speak. I speak as a member of this Board of Ed and as a Jewish mother of 3 children, 2 of which have graduated, but my daughter is still here at the high school. When I picked her up earlier today, she was not aware of what happened in Middlebrook as she's at the high school, but I felt I needed to explain it to her because she needs to be aware for her own safety, because she could easily have been the girl who received this note on her locker today. It was not an easy conversation, but I encouraged her to seek out the adults in the building that she trusts, and fortunately she has. two very good adults that she has a very good, strong relationship with. So I encourage other parents to have that same conversation with their children and to let them know that there are caring adults in the building. And so if they should feel uncomfortable for any reason, they should seek out those adults. And I wanted to say to my fellow Jewish community, because I know we've already been communicating online, I feel very confident in this administration, particularly Dr. Smith. He's an extremely compassionate, loving person, and I think our school district is very fortunate to have him at this time. Thank you.
Thanks, Lori.
You know, I'd like to just echo the sentiments at this table as a member of the Board of Education. What happened today and what's happened over the last 5 weeks is deplorable. And we need to look to our parents and our community members to find out how this happened and make sure it never happens again. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else?
Yeah, I think I can say with absolute certainty that the administration, Dr. Smith and his staff, will do whatever it is we need to do to make sure that the message at whatever level is appropriate gets to our students about tolerance, empathy, about the bad things that have happened in the world, and hopefully help them understand. Yeah, I guess my concern as I think about it really is that, boy, our society is just on a slippery slope. It really is. The whole social media issues, the things that kids are exposed to. I think my lucky stars I grew up when I did, that I didn't have all that in front of me. Life was a lot simpler then. And today it is tough. It's tough being a parent today and not knowing what your kids are being exposed to and how easily they're exposed to things. I think as parents we all have to kind of ratchet it up a couple notches and get more engaged with what our children are seeing and doing and who they're associating with and communicating with. But I can assure you that as a board, we will be 100% supportive of Dr. Smith and what the actions he wants to take and the things that he thinks is necessary to confront this and deal with it and fix it. But it's a bigger, broader issue, I'm sad to say, at least in my view.
Right.
Okay.
I think we'll definitely be very mindful of what happens in the next couple of days, weeks, and when you know you have a partner in us as you move forward. So thank you again for coming out tonight.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn.
Thanks, Lon. Okay, let's move on to committee reports. How about business operations?
Well, our next meeting is November 9th. We haven't met since our last meeting, and we're continuing. It will be a continuation of working on the budget. And a couple of things have come out of the tonight's financial report. You'll see that will be a topic of discussion for us in that meeting. So I'll update you on the November 9th meeting. The Middle District Building Committee has not met. We will also meet on the 9th of November before the board meeting. We're wrapping up. As everyone is aware, I think that there are some issues with the HVAC system at the school that, sadly, because of the change in weather, we're not able to really get in and understand and analyze because we've got cool days now. And the problems only occur on days when it's 85 degrees and high humidity. We won't see those again until probably May. But everybody is at the table trying to figure out and trying to identify and understand what happened. Other than that, from the building committee standpoint, financially we are still on our original target that I reported at the last meeting, and we are wrapping up and closing out a significant number of the contractors and done, so we will be closed out by the end of the year with the exception of the HVAC work.
Great, thank you. Chris, do you have anything to add?
No.
Okay. Teaching and learning.
Tonight on our agenda, we have quite a few 6141 proposals for new courses. All exciting, great choices, and I just wanted to let the board and the community know that all of these courses were fully vetted by the Teaching and Learning Committee. We talked and researched them in great detail and feel very confident in passing them. So, but you'll have them presented to you in this meeting.
Great.
Anything else to add? No, just that we are excited and we have heard all the descriptions and I think you guys will be excited too. So just trust that we have done our job and our due diligence as teaching and learning community members.
Policy and communication, I think we're
We're busy.
Just smiles at you.
I can do it if you like.
we had a very productive meeting on Tuesday.
We
but
did.
It's a work in progress. So
It
we
is.
are continuing to work very hard. No, we have nothing to bring to you yet, but we will. All
Other
right.
than we have several policies that we're working on.
Working really hard, all right. Okay, financial reports.
To start, this is for the month of September, so it's really just a month in right now. There's not really a trend so much, other than what we did do is we did a deeper dive into all the salaries, all the things we know based on contracts, so that we know they're set. So we feel comfortable with those numbers. With this report's gonna be a work in progress for a little bit. We're gonna change some things, as Glenn already picked my brain, that we were on the same wavelength. I'd like to put a column in here that says 2017 actuals, so we can do comparisons on it to see where we are and try and pull it from the year-to-date that we're looking at now versus the year-to-date to last year and pull that into the report so we have a comparison that way. Just so you know, this report was actually a manual report. It would be printed out, somebody would take it and then key it into an Excel spreadsheet. I have to say Mary Ann Salvato in the business office has been phenomenal in putting this report in whatever manner that we deem to be the right fit for us. So I'm very happy that we can pull a report now at any time and I have to sit in key numbers. The main areas that we're looking at right now is we're gonna go through the substitute section. I want to get a handle on that because most other areas, the salaries, things like that, they're all contracted. We know what they are. We know then from certain contracts further on, we know what those contracts are, and we know some expenditures which are controlled through our budget process. What is kind of the bigger one is the substitute, and that's what I'm looking at right now so that I can get a better handle of what those numbers are going to look like for the end of the year. We've had, as you'll see, we have a couple of different differences that we had. Glenn had brought up about the light and power. What we're doing now is we've been looking at the past couple of years of the actuals versus what the budget was in those years. And now that the budget's going from, before it was, if you were paying something you were over here, you could actually take it out of that line item. We're now making it a budget transfer so it goes into those line items that we need, so we have historical. So something like the light and power where the budget might be, it's 900,000, the actuals are actually running at about $1 million. So we're putting in the actuals where we see them over the past couple of years to make it in line so that we have a better budgeting tool for this year. So that's the main of where we are right now because it's only 1 month in and there's not a lot of changes just yet. So I'd open up for any questions. And I'd also, when this report goes out on the Friday, certainly if you want to send me questions that you have, that I can address them so that when we come to the meeting, I'll have those questions addressed and researched for you.
Thank you. Do you have any comments on what happened in Hartford today and how it's going to affect Wilton, or is it still too soon to know?
It's still a little bit too soon. We're not losing, and obviously we're not getting money pushed down, so that is a big part for us.
Yeah.
Couple of just changes behind the scenes that are being highlighted are arbitration things and how they do their arbitration awards and what they can and cannot look at anymore. Things they used to be able to look at fund balances and see how strong your fund balance is and say you have the ability to pay, so you can get more out of the contract. The things like that they're looking at. One of them, and I don't know if that finally got passed. I don't have a view.
I don't know. It's a very positive development, and what they tried to do in the legislature was have a veto-proof majority.
And they do.
Right.
So these things.
Both houses did.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
that,
they did.
yeah, it's good news for Wilton in the short term.
That's what I thought.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
It looks like the fear of the teacher retirement has gone away.
Right.
That's gone. And it does look like, I looked late today, this afternoon, we will get about 400 and some odd thousand of educational cost sharing.
Correct.
Which is, and we had but nothing, zero.
We put nothing because
But nothing
sure.
in, so
Yeah,
that's
good news.
plus
They're
4%.
taking a different one away, but
Yeah.
they're giving us back, so it really is.
And that'll
It's
increase
goodness.
next year. It'll be even
Yeah, I
higher
noticed
in
that, yeah.
2019,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
educational cost sharing. But getting that gray cloud of the teacher $4 million, $3 million hanging over, done away with is really big news. I mean, that.
For now.
Yeah.
Yes.
The only thing on the financial report, Ann and I did talk earlier today, I think it's important to know, and everybody understand as we move forward to the budget season, payroll and benefits is 80% of our expense. People, it's 80% of our total budget. So when we look at areas that we've got to reduce, cut back on, et cetera, the remaining 20% is nits and gnats to have any impact. So just tuck away in the back of your minds that it is people-related, 80% of our expense. Okay? That's a huge number. Okay? And for us to have any impact as we move forward in the budget season and drafting budgets, it's going to be almost impossible to do it without having some impact in that area, which is tough, because the remaining 20% is here, there, and everywhere. You're not going to get big numbers coming out of the rest of it at all. Okay, and that's important. We're going to work. I spent some time on the phone with Richard Creeth today on the utilities on both the gas and the light and power, because I'm already concerned about that number. And we've got great detail. We're going to go back and begin to work and try and dig into that. And we'll talk about that at the Ops Committee meeting coming up.
Right.
Okay, because we've got all the details. We've got all the bills by school, by meter, and understand what happened. And I think it may just be a budget miss.
Yeah.
Okay? But I've got to look back and see how this year's actual is comparing with like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, because we've relamped almost all the schools to LED. And we should be seeing some savings of our historical performance. So I just want to make sure we're there. Anyway. No.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank
But
you.
we're working on it.
Thank you, Ann. Next up, we have 8 new course proposals. Very exciting. So, Dr. Smith, do you want to lead that, or?
Great.
High school will be coming up.
Sure, and I just, for the good of the order, what I've asked is that our high school representatives give a very brief, concise, kind of 3-point summary of each course, knowing that these course proposals were thoroughly vetted at the Teaching and Learning Committee, and that the board has had an opportunity to read the proposal. So we're asking them to, in the interest of the scope here, to be very brief and concise.
And just to reassure them that Lori and I have listened to them, and they were very thorough in their presentations.
Well, the documentation was very thorough.
Yes.
Also, thank you.
So we
for that.
have a
It's interesting.
series of very talented educators here who are not just writers of curriculum and master teachers and architects, but they are caring, they are kind, they are compassionate, they are supportive, they believe in civility and respect, and they will be here for our entire Wilton High School community and beyond. Mr. Shells.
Okay, thank you. First up is a new social studies course called Civics in the Contemporary World. This is part of our social studies redesign, moving our study towards global-based issues. In the freshman year, students had world history this year. That goes up to about the Cold War. This course will pick up with issues that are important in the contemporary global environment. It's inquiry-based. Students will learn how to think critically, ask questions, come up with innovative solutions, and then intervene in debates that are important in the world. For example, issues like nuclear proliferation or world hunger, clean water, human rights, and so forth. The other half of the course is civics. It will be taught by the same teacher. It will happen in the sophomore year, positioning kids to go on then into the junior year to U.S. history. All part of the redesign that we drafted under the guise of the new Connecticut Social Studies frameworks. Any questions about that proposal? Thanks so much.
Jim Sheridan will present our revised Humanities course. Jim Sheridan, our English teacher in IL.
Thanks. Humanities has been offered for years as a 9th grade interdisciplinary English and social studies course, gifted and talented and subsequently honors. And the switches aren't enormous, but hopefully thoughtful and thought-provoking, that in keeping with social studies 9th grade moving to a global focus rather than strictly European Western Civ, Humanities is following suit. And it's actually last year's students' research project to bring in, vote on and evaluate some material that they thought should be added to the course from other parts of the world. And Mr. Cloudy and myself and Barb Lyons continue to work on trying to find some of the best and most engaging material from some places that students are exposed to a little bit less. But that's the major change with that course. I can actually speak about another course too, while I've got the microphone. That we wrote up a 6141 to add another honors elective. That right now our honors elective for juniors and seniors are Intro to Great Works, 20th Century U.S., and also Shakespeare. And a lot of students have requested a little bit more variety, especially ones who really don't want to take Shakespeare. So we've added New World Literature, which again is focusing on literature beyond the American or European experience and looking more at Asia, Africa, and the Middle East.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, are there any questions?
Yeah, the humanities course that we offer and the proposal here, does that tie or is that connected in any way to the state's, social studies programming, or is it, this is our structure here in Wilton, or it strikes me as something that we've.
It's aligned with the social studies framework.
I'm sorry?
It is aligned with the social studies framework.
Okay.
State social studies
For the
framework.
state, okay, but it is really our development, and I think we.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's homegrown, but we've managed to have our touch blended with.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. I mean, it's something that we offer, that we develop, and I think it's really super, that we aren't totally driven and chained to whatever the state says we have to do. I think it's great for us to be able to do that. I think it's good, okay.
And just a quick, all these classes are homegrown in the sense that, all the teachers have been, pushing, but, developing them and
Yeah,
pushing
no, I think
students
it's
further.
great. Yeah, I think that's great. And, okay.
Chris McCaffrey, UConn ECE English, early college experience, UConn early college experience English.
We're proposing to follow along with what Jim Sheridan said, an honors level elective for juniors and seniors that would be offered through UConn's ECE program. I've taught the course for 6 or 7 years elsewhere, and it's a course I love and I'm really proud to introduce here. The basic shift, if people compare it often to AP, and we are not looking to align it with AP, your typical AP course would be the focus on the literature itself. But this is UConn's freshman writing program, in which the literature is supposed to be a vehicle for student inquiry, further research, and basic college composition, not just for English majors, but really for all college students. So we're excited to offer that for our students, hopefully next year. Are there any questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
In your literature, you said that one of the 3 choices for students not seeking an AP course has seen decreased enrollment. What course is that?
Which AP course has seen?
You said one of them has seen decreased enrollment.
At the AP level, that would be the selected English, right?
That's making a comeback. As far as honors, it's Shakespeare.
As far as honors, it's been Shakespeare.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
The one thing I'll note, as we were discussing this, the one thing I learned about these, the ECE, early college experience, although it's a UConn-based thing, as a high school parent, I always thought, well, if my child's not going to UConn, then it's really not worth taking. But what I learned is so many colleges across the country are now accepting these
fabulous
credits.
opportunity,
So
yeah.
it's definitely well worth it for our whole student body if you
Yeah.
want to talk to them.
Bruce, I had Emma in 20th Century last year, and I'd like to think I helped prepare her for college.
She's doing
You did
great.
a really good job.
But Syracuse accepts UConn's EC credits as well. So, and even if the credits are not accepted, and there's a database, any student can do the research and figure out as they're doing the application. It's the experience.
Yeah.
Great.
Absolutely.
Project lead the way. I'm sorry.
Oh, just one more thing, because we have quite a few ECE classes, is that kudos to our staff who are bringing in their experience from other, areas. Like before they came to Wilton, a lot of them are coming in
I noticed
and
that,
have maintained their ECE accreditation on their own and of their own initiative. So it's just, thank you.
Project Lead the Way is our STEM program, and we're introducing aerospace engineering. It's noteworthy that the students spoke. We administered a survey, and the students chose that out of all the specialty courses. So this is our first specialty course. We have the 2 foundation courses, and now the specialty course. Very much aligned with NGSS, Next Generation Science Standards, the Common Core State Standards. So we committed to a 3-year sequence when we adopted the program. Guess the sound's working again, Max.
Who's doing it?
It's Bob's voice is setting in.
Sorry, no, the 4 units, I think, just noteworthy: aerospace design, propulsion, and alternative applications. So it's a very activity and project and problem-based course. We've been into the other courses. You see students really actively engaged, very kinesthetic work, actively engaged in the work, and the kids, I think, are excited about this new course. And again, we committed to a 3-year sequence, and the course has been vetted, and I think it's going to be really, really good for our high school. The kids are excited about it.
I noticed that the second runner-up was computer engineering, right?
Computer science.
Computer science? Will we be expecting a proposal for that next year?
I wouldn't say that will definitely be in the proposal. It may. Right now, we've reestablished a very strong computer science teacher who is teaching the computer science course at the high school. I think we need to determine whether that's a future need. And again, I think we take a look at, what the students definitely want. I think also long-term, we need to look at just the viability of how many courses we're gonna introduce. Truthfully, we had 3 sections of Project Lead the Way last year. This year, we have 1 of IED, Introduction to Engineering Design, and 1 in Principles of Engineering. So I think we're gonna have to see what the traction is for the courses in the program. I think we will evaluate how many students register at this point. We're already integrated that into the program of studies, and we'll see where we are. It's a possibility. It's not a definite.
And what grade level will the aerospace students be?
We've been doing some research on the extent to which the students need to take a prerequisite, meaning one of the 2 foundation courses. Believe it or not, we have yet to get a very clear answer. We were told at first you had to take the 2 foundation courses. The jury's out a little bit. We have another call into Project Lead the Way, and we're looking at what some of the schools in the area are doing. So we would envision at this point that at least 1 foundation course would be required. So it stands to reason they would not be freshmen.
Right.
It would be more of a range. The goal with Project Lead the Way all along has been to build this 3-year sequence and get students involved early, get freshmen involved in the foundation courses so that they want to go on, in which case we might offer a second specialty course and just keep building it.
That's great.
So we have to just do a little more research and see what the demand is.
I noticed that none of the other schools are offering
That's a good observation.
the aerospace engineering. So how did we come to make that selection?
The students.
We surveyed, at the end of last year, we surveyed the students who were currently enrolled in Project Lead the Way, and then we administered another Google survey this year. And as you could see, some, I think I had it written down, 31% selected that as the first choice, and some 50% as the second choice. So, you know what? We want to do something new and different and be the ones that are pioneering.
Hey, it's fantastic.
For that.
That's great. Yeah. All right.
Next up in the lineup, Mrs. Soderholm. UConn, Individual and Family Development, and we actually have a teacher who's already trained to teach this course. Who is outstanding teacher. So, Mrs. Soderholm.
Thank you. So this course is a UConn course. It will follow human development from infancy all the way through death. So it does do a whole unit on the whole grading process. This course is really exciting for the Applied Arts Department because it is a college level course in a department where we don't have any college level courses. So that's why we're so excited about this one. The Child Development Program has grown a lot with Christina Suzuki here. She is the teacher who is certified to teach this course, and her students are really just looking to take another course in this area. So this would be a really academically rigorous course that we could offer for the students who are already interested in that area of study.
Do any other schools in the DIRC have a similar course? Do you know?
I don't know.
Okay. It sounds fabulous.
Yeah.
We'll get you an answer to that question.
Addition.
It's a good question.
Thank you.
We'll just answer.
And because it falls in, it is a career technology education, we can cover some costs of this through our Perkins grant, which is an extra added benefit for us.
Any questions?
That's great.
Thank you.
Mr. Slater, Advanced Public Speaking.
Thank you for the opportunity. This course comes out of the fact that Wilton High School already is leading the way by offering as many public speaking courses as they are. What we have discovered is I am a little overloaded with the number of students who want to take the basic intro course. And because there are so many students in the class, it really is an intro course. So the students came back to me and said, when are we going to get more into the technology and what's really being done in the business world? Thank you for the introduction on how to speak. Now what do I do with that? So I started doing research for them and thought we can do this. Advanced public speaking, or what we're going to be calling presentation literacy, is an opportunity to actually start talking about what happens in the real world, what we're doing right now, how they're presenting themselves, and adding more technology to it. We'd be the only school in the DERG that's doing it. We're already ahead of what's going on in other districts because I've done the research. Even public speaking classes at Staples, for instance, or push off on Humanities, they're not offered as a separate course. So it's really student driven, and if you're looking for homegrown, we're it.
You stole my line?
Very well spoken.
I counted his so.
I was gonna ask if he was available to give the board, a workshop.
Yeah, really.
You'd be shocked at how many teachers have come up and said, can we do this for staff development?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I know, I'd like to enroll. Any, is that it? Okay, thank you.
Mr. Webster and Dr. Zobler, Advanced Spanish Conversation and Composition.
Thank you. With your support, 6 years ago, we were afforded the opportunity to launch an array of new honors level pathways for languages and offering more choices and opportunities for enrichment for our students. 3 years ago, we launched AP Spanish Literature and Culture, and in which currently there are about 15 students enrolled. Due to the high demands and rigor of that course, we have 31 students this year who elected not to enroll in that course. Most of whom would have continued to take Spanish if they had a different type of opportunity. So we've decided to propose a new course entitled Advanced Spanish Conversation and Composition, which is aligned with the UConn ECE program. And Dr. Zobler could speak to that a little bit more because she's cross-certified with that program.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. Actually, we started offering ECE program at the school in 2011, and it was in combination with the AP language course. It was very difficult to maintain the demands of the course. The College Board imposes into the AP course and the ECE program. So we were trying to juggle the two things. Eventually, we have not been able to offer the course for the last 2 years. So as we were looking at this number of students who may not have an opportunity to continue their language studies in their senior year because they might not chose to go into the Spanish literature course, we explored the possibility of just offering the ECE program as a real bonus, because this is an intermediate conversation, an intermediate composition course. There are 2 semesters, so the students will get 6 college credits by the time they're done with the course. So that's really exciting, at a cost that it's
$250.
$250.
Bargain.
Yeah.
And 87% of the credits transfer to a number of schools.
So just tonight alone, we have the opportunity for the kids to get 12 credits. And then we currently offer how many? ECUs?
Science, just science, right?
Oh, we have, no.
There's another, there's English.
We have one in art.
Don's our ECE trained.
We have European history, American history, government, we have physics, we have digital media, and now we have English.
It's a year's worth of
That's
credits.
the opportunity to basically get a year's worth of college while you're in high school. That's fabulous.
Not to mention all the AP courses that we
Yeah,
offer.
yeah,
And
yeah.
further, well, you're already sold, but
He assumes we're saying
the
anything, yes.
curriculum marches to a drum that's driven by student inquiry and not a standardized multiple choice
Right.
test,
Oh,
which
right.
is more personalized and more likely to lead to robust student engagement.
And then
Yeah.
that level better, preparing you for college because that's what we'll be for.
Thank you. I think Dr. Smith would have.
So just before you all say it, first of all, thank you so much for being here this evening. And I think number one, it's important to just reiterate that these folks, along with their colleagues at the high school, spend many, many hours researching, exploring, and then creating the curriculum. And we have a very rigorous curriculum. The courses presented tonight are examples of how we are moving that rigor to another level. But perhaps more importantly, as we were speaking at the opening of the meeting about the issues that we need to confront in our society, and about creating opportunities both in school and outside of school for our kids to experience diverse perspectives and develop empathy. I hope you heard those themes come through tonight in those courses. And through these courses, we're going to teach kids to, beyond what we're already doing, to develop a deeper appreciation for others from different backgrounds, to consider diverse perspectives, and to truly develop a more global understanding of this world and the many interconnections. And I couldn't be more grateful for that work and for the work that you're doing, and just your personal presence in the high school on behalf of our kids who are confronting a lot of issues. So thank you very, very, very much. I'm really, really grateful. Thank you.
And I also want to thank Dr. O'Donnell and all of you, because you have so many presentations tonight, because if you recall, about a year ago, we adjusted the process for presenting 6141 so that we could get these courses presented to us prior to the formulation of our budget. So it meant an adjustment on their part, so thank you all for being here tonight and accommodating our new process.
So these won't go until next year?
Next year.
Right.
They'll go in the program of study. Students will register in the winter.
Right.
We'll conduct our sectioning exercises and determine how many sections we'll offer, but these will be, we anticipate 8 new vibrant courses for next school year. So the curriculum at Wilton High School is live, vibrant, rigorous, and dynamic.
Yeah.
And responsive to the students and what they want and need.
Bravo.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks all of you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Scott.
Next up is a review and discuss of the 2018-19 Wilton Public Schools District Calendar.
Great. So briefly, you know that as a result of last year's legislative action, we are no longer beholden to a regional calendar. So we've attempted to make some compromises with this calendar, and I wanted to offer some of the considerations that went into making this calendar. I received a great deal of very positive feedback over the last couple of years about starting after Labor Day. Given where Labor Day falls on a calendar, when it falls on the 1st, 2nd, 3rd of September, I think it makes a lot of sense to start after Labor Day. When it falls later than that, 4th, 5th, 6th, sometimes the 7th of September, I think it makes sense to start before Labor Day. So as we go through a 7-year cycle, we're going to see those opportunities where for a number of years we're before, and for a number of years we are after Labor Day. We also tried to make some changes. In going through the calendar, what we're trying to do is protect big chunks of instructional time. And so we made some changes, and so you'll note as you look through it, we pushed most of the professional learning days to the end of August before the students return. So the only 2 where we are not, I believe, is Columbus Day, thank you, Columbus Day and then Election Day in November. So the 5th of November, that'll be a change. Students will be in session that day. At about this time of year, I start to worry and perseverate about the weather. And if I've shared with you, you see we get these reports from our meteorologist, and like earlier in this week when we get torrential downpours, the reports come in bright red and 15 font. So that being said, we anticipate we're going to have weather over the winter, and we may experience closures or delays somewhere 3 or 5 times over the winter. So we try to protect against moving too late into June, because in my opinion, that's not quality instructional time. At that point of the year, typically, students are done, tests have ended, teachers are tired, and we just don't get the same bang for our buck as we do in the early year. So in planning this calendar, we try to plan to officially wrap up somewhere around mid-June, and I think that's appropriate. You'll note also in this calendar, we have stuck with the April break. There are some very good reasons for doing that. We did explore moving the break to March, and as I looked at that, it just didn't make sense with the way that we were planning the rest of the calendar, so we're proposing April. And then beyond that, there has been interest, and in some of our other communities in the area, other towns take a full February recess. In this particular calendar, we haven't. We did add an extra day to the February recess, and we planned an early dismissal for February 13th with those hours in the afternoon being given to professional learning. So those are the significant changes. My hope is that the board will take a look at this. We'll put it on the calendar for approval at the next time we meet, and then we will gather both at the policy committee and the teaching and learning committee to review the considerations and assumptions of the calendars, and then come forward with calendar proposals for 1920 and 2021, and that way folks in the community will have ample time to plan vacations and such.
And I think the goal is to have those 2 years done.
Yes.
As early in the next year as possible.
Correct.
So maybe by December, January, we'll be looking for, yeah, but we'll be looking for input from teaching and learning, like, maybe by December, so that our policy committee can then,
maybe we'll put it on our agenda.
please do. See that you do.
And we'll be very thorough in our discussion.
As we always are.
Yes,
Yeah. We had historically over the last 2 years, the rationale for starting after Labor Day was the Miller Driscoll building project, okay? And because it gave us more time during the summer for a full work crew to get there and get it done, and it really was the right thing to do. And I guess, like you, I've heard from parents that they really like that after Labor Day, full summer. But there was an email that came recently from a parent that said that how we go so late then into June that it impacts their students, their children, from going to summer camps as counselors. They can't get there. They can't start because camps start before then because other schools are out, in the first week of June.
If I could speak to that specific point.
Yeah.
In preparing for tonight, I went online and looked at all of the 18-19 calendars, at least those that have been posted and approved, of our DIRG. And although we are the only one in 18-19 starting after Labor Day, all but one other school district ends before we do.
Yeah.
So they're ending later.
Oh, later.
So I said that wrong, right?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Vice versa.
Okay.
So we're actually one of the earliest
Why is that?
endings.
What are you
It's
doing?
just, I don't know, it's the magic
So,
that Dr. Smith did.
the way I was very conscious of that concern,
Mm-hmm.
and so the way we tried to mitigate against that and try to buy some time in June is by pushing the professional learning days that
I think that's
in the past had been during
Before
the school
school
year,
starts?
in August before
You
school
buy a
starts.
couple of days doing that?
Correct, and so we bought a couple of days. And
it's
you'll
just-
see as calendars come forward, in those years when we start before Labor Day because of where Labor Day falls, that'll buy us more time in the calendar, and we'll have some choices. We can choose to end in earlier June or add another day to February, so they'll have some opportunities. So I think, what I would say to folks is, going forward while, for the most part, in general, starting, stopping breaks will be fairly static. There will be some variation year over year as a result of whether or not we start before or after Labor Day.
If I could share some other observations that I learned, to put this in perspective. October, not all of our fellow districts have Columbus Day off. Some have a full day of school that day. So I was happy to see that we at least are making very good use of that day with our professional development. And that's just something to keep in mind. Like you said, one of the things we'll discuss going forward. Because sometimes that could be a choppy day depending on where the Jewish holidays fall. It could fall like, you have off Monday because of Columbus Day, and then you could have off that Wednesday because of Yom Kippur, which makes that a very choppy week. So that's something in the years where things like that happen, maybe we need to consider whether or not Columbus Day is a school day or a day off, as long as we have that flexibility. I'm happy to see that we're also using Election Day for professional development, and I would also put a request into the town. We talked about this offline, but maybe we could use other facilities, town facilities, for our polling versus our schools.
For off-year elections.
Off-year. I mean, I think
not for
the presidential 4-year elections that draw the most voters to the polls, it makes sense to use the schools because of the available parking and all of that. But like, for example, this year, I can't imagine, hopefully we'll get a good turnout. Everybody should turn out and vote no matter what. But I would think the turnout is going to be such that, Comstock or other town locations could easily handle the volume of voters. and we would not have to have a day off from school. So I think that that's something we need to have a conversation with the town officials
I did begin
about
to
that.
explore that with
Okay.
Carol Kleinfeld, and she actually referred me to another woman who happens to be a Wilton resident and works at the State Election Commission. I haven't had a chance to connect with her
Okay.
yet. And, you know, Carol's points were really good, and part of the reason that they use the schools is because of what you just described. She said they need to be able to accommodate 4,000 voters if 4,000 voters showed up all at once. And our facilities typically have the largest parking lots and are ADA accessible, and those are two of the guiding reasons. So I'll finish those conversations. I think the concern that I had, beyond just whether we're in session or out of session, or really at Cider Mill, you know, it's, and during primaries, when we don't close on primary days, and voters come in that main entrance. So she and I did talk about the possibility of moving that site over to Miller Driscoll, where we could segregate the voting area and school could still run. So that's something we'll explore as the weeks unfold here.
And then the other observation was that there are several towns that have the full week in February and the full week in April. And that's one of the reasons why their end date pushes out a little bit later, because the extra days. So my only question about the March thing, I know you said that it made better sense just from the whole flow. I guess my question is to Dr. Smith, what about testing? We've always talked about, and I do recall a couple of years ago you mentioning that March would be better from a testing perspective to have a break in March. So what are your thoughts?
No,
and
we
feelings
couldn't have the
tonight?
break in March because of testing is what the.
Well, that used to be when the CMTs were in.
Right,
Yeah,
but now
yeah.
that's gone away.
Right.
Does that give us the flexibility to look at a March break?
Yes,
it does. Yeah, absolutely it does. And I think that's something, you know, one of my...
That's something we should kind of talk to the town, see what, you know. what the
Well,
feedback-
You're gonna get 1,000 responses.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
We've,
all various
our
opinions.
direction to Superintendent Smith was that academics will always drive the calendar.
Mhm.
We're not driven by, you know, lower hotel rates and,
Yeah.
Right, well, that's why I
airfares and
asked about
things.
March, if you could
But-
speak to testing in March.
You know, I would ask my principal friends back here, but I think it would be a better time to have a break in March. Right now, it's very hard to schedule some of these testings in April, correct?
Yeah. Yes, and you know, I think there's also things to consider about teachers and vacations with their families.
The other concern I have, because I really did look at that, you know, in addition to really considering the testing, we have our spring athletes here at the high school.
Yeah.
You know, that's a short season, they start early, so they're all here for the April break. And as we think about what we value in terms of time with family, this really flies in the face of that.
Exactly.
And speaking with Chris McDougall, he said if you were going to have a March break that honored our spring athletes, you'd have to do it in the first week of March. And so that's really out of sync with just about everything. I think the other concern about pushing the break into March and why you don't see it here is you have all of those weeks that lead into June, with the only other break being a day at Memorial Day.
Yeah,
And that's
that would give
very,
three
very
full
long
months.
We could do a
Right.
long weekend in April, though.
We could definitely play with it, and I don't think, I'm not suggesting that we've given up on that. I just want you to know that this is not a question that was ignored. You know,
Right.
we
No, I
looked
know
at it
you
very carefully.
considered
Okay.
it.
okay, then we will see this again as an action item on the next agenda. And then going forward, these are the sorts of things we'll use as our building blocks for the 19, 20, 20, 21 calendars.
Yeah.
Okay. Next up, under review and discuss district improvement plans.
Yes. Okay, so Andrea and I wanted to provide you with a little bit of an update on how we're progressing in implementing the recommendations from the DMC report that we had conducted several years ago. If you recall, there are two basic components to the DMC recommendation. One was for general education around SRBI, and the other recommendations were specific to special ed. So I'm going to talk about the SRBI process, and then Andrea will talk about special ed. You may recall that we have been building a system of SRBI with a bit more integrity based upon the recommendations of the DMC report from the past 2 years. So building the past 2 years, putting into place systems and processes, doing professional learning, and a lot of analysis around data. What we're going to be doing this year, as you can see in the goal, is to make sure that we're implementing that with fidelity, to make sure that we are doing exactly what it is that we said we were going to do. So you'll notice I've written several goals. You have the detailed action plan in front of you. I'm not going to go through all of those steps. I'm just going to talk about the goals. If you have questions about the steps, we can certainly talk about it. So that first goal right there really has to do with the DMC recommendation that we provide intervention services above and beyond the core academic area that the child is receiving intervention in. So basically, if a child's got reading difficulties, we don't pull them out of the reading class. We provide that intervention service above and beyond the reading class. Traditionally, we would often pull kids out of reading to receive intervention services, but kids who are behind in reading don't need less reading, they need more reading. So we're making sure that the intervention services are above and beyond. Now that does involve some difficult choices about what students will miss in order to get that services, but our schools have been very good about working with families to identify times in which that can happen. I just need to make sure that it's happening in all cases. The second two goals have to do with making sure that our diagnostic assessments and our intervention programs are targeting comprehensive needs of students. And this may be kind of complicated to explain, but sometimes when we intervene with students, we tend to assess and intervene in certain areas and not look to see that we are addressing all of their comprehensive needs. So for instance, in reading, there are 5 basic areas that need to be addressed. So what we put into place are assessment practices where we are comprehensively assessing all of those 5 areas and providing interventions that are comprehensive across all 5 of those areas. Make sense? Mm-hmm. And we're doing that in both reading and in math. The fourth goal has to do with making sure that the intervention plans are complete, that they have all the required components, and that they're put into our tracking system. The fifth and sixth goals have to do with making sure that we are being responsive to student performance when they're in intervention. A lot of questions come up as to when should a child be moved between the tiers. If you remember, there are tiers of intervention, tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. And we have provided very specific guidance to the interventionist about when they need to move students between those levels, as well as when they need to be referred to special education or exited back to general education. And that last goal has to do with developing a clear Tier 1 program for social emotional learning. The past 2 years, we've been focusing our intervention program primarily on academics in reading and math. But there are students who have social and emotional challenges, as well as what's called executive functioning challenges. That has to do with organization and task completion. It's very difficult to define Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions when you don't have a well-defined Tier 1. Tier 1, if you recall, is what goes on in general education. We have very good Tier 1 programs in reading and math. And although I think we do try to address social, emotional, and executive functioning in an informal way, we haven't clearly articulated what our expectations are around outcomes for students in those areas by grade level, assess them, set benchmarks, so that we can then define what a Tier 2 would look like. Some of our Board of Ed members have been on the Curriculum Review Committee around social emotional learning. We have been able to identify what those outcomes would be by grade level. We've begun to explore programs, and so this year we will be deciding how we're going to roll that out the following year. After that is complete, where we have really clear assessments around social emotional learning and executive functioning, we can then start defining Tier 2 in that area. that make sense?
Well, how do you do that?
How do you assess somebody's social emotional
Yeah.
learning? The first thing is to define what the outcomes should be. Being very clear about what we expect students to know and be able to do socially and emotionally from kindergarten to 12th grade.
Chuck, can you just give an example to illustrate?
For instance, we would want students, let's say, to be able to identify their feelings, to name them.
Okay.
And so then we could develop an assessment around that embedded in the curriculum where we can say this student is able to accurately identify their emotions and this student isn't. That's a very simplistic description, but that you get the idea.
Yeah, the idea, I mean, first they have to identify, and then we teach them to help to regulate.
To regulate.
Which is really the key
Yes.
skill.
If you would like, I could come back and share with you the work of that committee, so you can get an idea of the things that we are trying to support students,
That'd
the
be helpful.
capacities.
Sure, that'd be great, thank you. Any other questions?
Okay. I'll turn it over to you, I'll get you.
Okay, so the next piece is really looking at the DMC report as it related to reading and special education. So let me take you through that piece, and then I'll talk a little bit about some of the other pieces of DMC that you don't necessarily see as a goal today, but we're in deep study about. So what you'll see is this is well aligned to what's happening in SRBI. So this is kind of the next stage. Hopefully, this will make some sense in terms of, from a process perspective, the first piece is we will be sharpening the toolkit of our staff at the building level to diagnose, to understand what are the diagnostic criteria to identify reading disorders in children earlier. And so we'll be looking to do that, to be able to really take a deep dive into our diagnostic processes. Next, we'll be looking at intervention. So we'll be expanding our teachers' skill set in systematic code-based instruction using a Norton-Gillingham approach, as well as some additional supports in terms of phoneme sequencing, phoneme fluency, phoneme and nonsense word fluency, and understanding of phonics, which is kind of the gold standard when looking at dyslexia. And then looking at comprehension work on how to develop comprehension skills in kids who may have good reading abilities. They can decode words well, but comprehension is weak. And so we want to build vocabulary and understanding of language. Within that process, one of the areas that we need to refine and develop are our progress monitoring tools. So we need to be able to quickly identify short, sweet, quick assessments, formative assessment of students that is responsive to that instruction so that we can change things when progress is lackluster sooner. What we don't want to do, in general ed, we assess kids 3 times a year. In special education, we will be assessing much more regularly with short, sweet, and very responsive assessment practices so that when that progress is lackluster, we don't wait 6 months to know. We'll know in 4 or 5 weeks, be able to respond to that by adjusting instruction in a myriad of ways. So we'll be monitoring that very carefully. So we want to make sure teachers have access to those assessments in ways that don't take away from instruction. The worst thing possible is to ask for more assessment and then they do less teaching, right? We don't want to just test. We want to teach and then assess whether or not that teaching is making a difference. And then we'll be looking at setting up common practices and protocols across the grade levels so that teachers know what to do, parents know what to expect, and we'll be able to share data regularly with families and make decisions about what are the next steps for any student who's not making the kind of progress that we need to see. So that's really our focus instructionally for the remainder of this year. We'll be doing that work for full implementation of those protocols for the 18-19 school year. So this is going to be our year. We're going to be pulling the baseline data, and a year from now, or a year from spring actually, we'll be able to share with you whether or not we're starting to see the kinds of results. I would caution that this isn't something you're going to see magic in 1 year. This is going to be a process. I would say you're going to want to start to see some trend data in the next, as the years progress, with improving responses from our students with disabilities on the more classical assessments that you're used to seeing, the SBACs and the MAP tests. The other piece of the DMC report that we're studying is staff utilization. Amount of time staff is spending in direct work with students versus in service to processes in special education, PPT meetings, IEP meetings, those kinds of things. So we're doing a lot of data gathering and analysis now, and hopefully we'll be able to come to you next year at this time with some real targets for how to make sure that our staff is spending the vast majority of their time in direct service to students while still managing the processes of special education effectively and efficiently. So I'm open to any questions you might have along the way.
Yeah, I guess at some point, you know, we're going to have to figure out how to quantify and how to address and how to respond to the magic $2 million, okay, that was projected in the report that we were going to save if we adopt and take the actions that they put forward. We're just going to have to figure out how to do that. You know, where are we in the process? Are we ever going to get there? Personally, for me, I think it's pie in the sky. I never really quite got it because this is a very complex business thing that we're trying to do here with these kids. And from my perspective, I probably shouldn't say this. I don't care about the $2 million. I care about taking care of the kids. And if we can save somewhere along the way or be more efficient, fine, all well and good. But I think we are, because it's become such a hot button and such an issue, we're just going to have to spend the time, understand where are we in the process, are we ever going to get there, and still do the things that we need to do, is the question.
But we never, when we, approved doing the DMC study, it was never about saving money.
Well,
it was about giving
it
our
was
students.
better. It was about doing better. But out of that report, it became public, and they published, and they said, if we do all these things, you can save $2 million, okay?
Yeah.
And we've got to figure out how to address that and respond to that. Are we ever? Are we doing what we need to do to take care of the students, which is the most important thing, the first priority? And by adopting some of the things, yeah, we can probably save $500,000 a year. We become more efficient, reassign personnel, whatever the steps are, but we need to identify and address those steps and figure it out, guys. We can't keep kind of kicking the can down the road. We've got to come up with it, okay? We're a year into it now, I guess a year?
We're 2 years into it.
2 years into it.
Right.
And at every budget session, every budget period, the question is going to come, where's the $2 million savings?
I would
Okay?
expect it would continue to come.
Yeah.
It started in July. And
So-
there's a lot to look into because it's a more complex issue than simply saying cut
I know.
X number of staff. That's easy to do. We
But
can
that's
make
what
that
the report
decision.
said to do.
I know.
Yeah.
And
So-
that's why people in the community
I
are
understand.
like,
Yeah, and I'm not, trust me, I'm not saying that.
Right.
But
Need
we
to do a
have to
better
be
job of
able to
explaining
respond
it.
to it,
I agree.
okay?
I couldn't agree more.
What decisions have we made that make that either doable or not doable, and why did we make those decisions? And we made them because it's the right thing to do for the students, for the kids, okay?
Yes.
Which was number one. But we are going to have to figure out how we come forward and how we make some response to that issue. Because I can tell you guys, it's going to be a question when we do our budget presentations. It's coming up, and we have to be able to respond to it. Okay.
I know, but I get so frustrated because.
Well, you and I both.
No, but Lori and I sat, as teaching and learning, we sat in at one of the first meetings, and DMC was there. It was Chuck and Ann and every building principal. And what are the steps? So one was, well, parents might want fewer PPTs if we communicate better. And I think people think you can just write a newsletter. And that was, no, I know you know this, Glenn, but I'm saying what's frustrating to me is that Chuck and Ann and Sharon, they are following through. Their steps, they're following through. They're telling it, they're keeping it. Every year they tell us what steps we've taken. That's all towards the goal. And I think even reading the report, if someone thinks you can just cut $2 million like that.
Well, that's the problem.
but they do.
But they do.
That.
Well, I know,
That's perception. And we've got to figure out how to make their perception our reality.
Or
Okay.
our
Vice versa,
reality,
vice versa.
their
No.
reality. I mean,
Or our reality, their reality, one or the other.
They need
Okay?
to better understand.
So we've got to figure out how do we better communicate
How do
what
we-
we're doing,
Yeah.
why we're doing it, what the benefits are, both financially, if there are financial benefits, and for the students.
Right.
Well, the students first, though. I mean, we've got to do what we've got to do to take care of the kids. I mean, that's number
Yes.
one.
And the work has been going on.
Okay.
Am
And I
wrong,
know that.
Jack?
No, it has
For the
been.
last 2
Yeah.
years.
Glenn, one of the things, if I could just, maybe I'm speaking out of turn here, but I remember you speaking rather passionately several years ago about the level of increase from year to year in special ed expenditures. I mean, DMC had their recommendation. What I would suggest may be a better way to measure the effectiveness is to see whether it has any impact upon the rate of increases, rather than whether we're going to suddenly see a huge savings.
Exactly. Well, the concept out there, the feeling, and you're absolutely right, is that, yeah, we're going to save $2 million. We can save $2 million by adopting their recommendations. That's what people are thinking, that's what people are talking about.
Right, so I think what we need to say is to flip that conversation, that's not our goal. Our goal is really to see that we've got costs under control, and we're not seeing the level of increase in special ed that we had seen in prior years.
And if that's what the answer is, and that's what the answer is, we need to figure out how do we communicate that effectively? And how can we present that so people understand that? Because I never bought into the $2 million from the get-go. Ever.
Okay. Dr. Smith, do you have a point?
If you don't mind, I'm just going to make a couple of points, because I think the assumptions driving that dollar amount were one around group sizes, specifically tied to our related service providers. So if we increase group sizes,
right,
then we will have a need for fewer service providers. The other was the time allocation by our staff and the way they spend their time. And I would just remind the whole board and anyone who else might be listening that for a couple of years, Ann Paul had come before the board at the end of the year and described how, through a variety of efforts, we are reducing actually the number of PPTs, and fairly substantially over the last 3 years. But that has not yet yielded an opportunity to reconsider staffing. The other piece, and the piece that I worry about, and I wonder if, as I've thought about this report and these findings, and look at the way that our district has struggled to respond, I wonder if in some sense this report didn't do us a disservice by comparing us to like districts without knowing what those like districts are. Because I will tell you, this year, beginning last May, I have been meeting with the superintendents in our region in Lower Fairfield County, and our topic of discussion in each of those meetings is the perception of the epidemic levels of anxiety and stress among our students. I was just at an event where Scarsdale High School was presenting their research on what they're doing in response to that, and I can tell you, across the room, heads were nodding everywhere. And so we are facing, I think, a different set of challenges today around the way that we socially and emotionally support our students, particularly at the high school level. And I would be very cautious about coming forward and eliminating willy-nilly school psychologist positions, because many of those folks are on the front lines in support of these students. And some of these needs do not manifest themselves until kids really start to begin to think about college. And so, we are very richly, generously staffed in our school psychologists, and I think appropriately so.
I don't disagree with that
Dr.
at all.
Smith, if I may, I think the other piece that the DMC report neglected to look at and impacts Wilton is that our related services staff are not solely assigned to the children with disabilities across the day. And so while we may be able to and will be able to do a lot of work to I want to make sure students are with staff, students are with certified staff as much as is humanly possible. And we have to meet our legal obligations to the parents of children with disabilities under federal and state statute. But understanding that our related services people, and when I say related services, I'm talking about school psychologists, school social workers, speech and language pathologists, occupational therapists, and physical therapists are primarily that group. When I'm speaking about those folks, I need the community and all of us to understand that they are working in service to other children as well. And whether it's a speech pathologist who may be working at the lower grades to help students who come to school perhaps without the phonemic and phonological awareness skills, They can intervene to teach those skills without needing to be labeled a child with a disability.
Yeah.
And we would use them to do that. That is their area of expertise. Same with a student who might come to school not having developed age-appropriate self-regulation and coping skills to deal with frustration or negotiation. Those kinds of pieces, those can be done as intervention without other interventionists being assigned. So I'm not sure that the DMC study really looked at the amount of work that those people are doing in service to the larger population of students. And so some of that assumption that if we just have fewer PPTs, we can decrease those people, I think is doesn't make that much, because when I read the study, it looks at how much time a psychologist might use to do an evaluation. Our psychologists do far more than evaluate, far more. They do a lot of direct service to students. So I just want to be careful, and I agree with you that the job is to communicate that, and that's my job.
So we just have to figure out how can we do this, and so everybody gets on the same sheet.
Because you're right, it already has come up.
And I'm working on it.
Yeah, it came up. It came up at the
I really am. I'm on it.
Board of Finance.
I'm on it.
Yeah, the Board of Finance meeting. It came up where they were doing this stuff. So we've got to figure out. And the anxiety thing you talk about.
Right.
I couldn't agree with you more.
But those students aren't like classified as.
I know.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying,
They're our
right?
regular,
So
they're our
our-
regular kids. They're
I
our regular
know.
students.
So that's
and
important
it's-
information
so
that isn't being captured.
So anyway, we have to figure out how we do this. Okay.
Agreed.
Any
But
other questions for Andrea?
No,
Or Chuck?
Go for it. Go do it.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you both.
So I asked Fran and Eric also to present a very brief update.
Yes.
You've seen a lot of our technology plans, but that's one of our strategic plans, so I
Yes.
thought they'd come and just spend 2 minutes with us to let us know where they are. Another great.
Yeah.
All right, well, good evening. And as Dr. Smith said, we've had the opportunity to be here twice now since the beginning of school, presenting on the rollout of the digital learning initiative, as well as the curriculum and how we've been embedding technology within the curriculum. This is basically an update on our strategic plan. It hasn't changed a lot since last year. What we really like to report is the fact that we've made a lot of progress in terms of what we intended to do with phase one. The goal is to create a digital learning environment that supports personalized learning. And everything that you've seen tonight basically is what we feel we are helping to do in terms of providing that environment in service of learning. For any class that was presented tonight, technology was a major component of it. And we want to make sure that within the 3 years, technology becomes more like air, something that's expected to be there and be there when it's needed, but not so visible. The things that we've accomplished already with the implementation on the tools, the resources, the equipment that Eric will talk about, the incredible staff that we have in our schools, and now we're working on the next step, which is really to work much more with professional learning, to continue our work with changing the physical environment in our learning commons, and to really work on the curriculum so that it's aligned, it's scaffolded, it's assured. We're looking at some of the successes we've had, for example, with our digital literacy course in 6th grade, and seeing how we can manage to make that something at the high school where we're looking at not just digital citizenship, but digital leadership. We talk about social media and the responsibility that students have as not only being able to use it effectively, but be upstanders, not just bystanders. And so I think that we're in a really good place with the plan. And we've made a lot of progress, and we will continue to do so.
And on the technology side, all of the items we had listed in phase one for completion for September, we've completed, or about 95% complete on that. We have some additional cabling we've been doing this year to fill in some spots that we weren't aware of, and have been addressing those needs as we can. I would just like to say, as we go into phase 2, which will be next, will complete over next summer, in years 3, 4, and 5, that's all budget dependent, and we'll be presenting that as we go forward in the budget. You know, the access points, we now have one in pretty much every instructional space. We just need to remember some of those access points are 5 and 6 years old, so they need to be replaced in the budget cycle next year so they can support the instruction and the learning that's going on. So as we bring the budget forward, we will just be continuing on that replacement plan.
Great, thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, I like the last page, deploy robust, reliable. Robust and reliable.
That's what we're.
Laura and I have the privilege of being on their digital advisory committee, and we start every committee meeting with a go around the table and share celebrations. And it's just amazing to sit there and listen to what's happening inside all of the schools. And the one thing we commended these two for is that when you look at where we were a year ago versus where we are today, I mean, we've just made leaps and bounds, and I think it's to the credit of these two individuals, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Moving on to action items. At our last meeting, we reviewed and discussed budget goals, constraints, and assumptions for next year's budget. Has everyone had a chance to review? Any further comments? Is there a motion to approve?
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, it's approved. Thank you. Okay, future business. Our next meeting is on Thursday, November 9th, which I believe is 2 days after Election Day, which means
Yes.
we're gonna have a couple lame ducks on our board at our next meeting.
When is the
They're already
transition?
pretty lame. December 1st.
I believe.
Yeah, exactly.
I specifically would like to draw to the community's attention that from 6:30 to 7:30 that evening, we will be hosting a community conversation about the upcoming budget discussion. That is the community's opportunity to come and meet in small groups with board members and let us know what your budget priorities and concerns are. We did this 2 years ago.
Yeah.
It was very helpful. So I hope that members of the community will turn out. It's going to be in the Wilton High School Library Learning Commons. So that's 6:30 to 7:30. And then our board meeting will immediately follow that. Are there, at this point of the meeting, are there any members of the public who would like to come and express a sentiment with us? Seeing no one, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you. And thank you very much to our AV techs.
What's that?